with the flow. The best advice, somebody that was a superior of me at one time in my career said, she gave advice to hopeful adoptive families and said about that hospital experience, walking into that, you need to be like a leaf on a tree and blow like the wind. And I felt like that was such a great nugget of information, much harder to do than to say.
All of
But
this is.
you have no control. It's like the most vulnerable position you will ever be in your life.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in la la land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Welcome back to the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with someone whose heart and dedication have touched countless lives over the past 26 years. Laurie Shelton, an adoption specialist, has guided over 750 birth parents through some of the most important decisions of their lives. Laurie started her journey answering a newspaper ad as a pregnancy counselor, unaware that it would lead her to a fulfilling career in adoption. From counseling birth mothers to working with adoptive families, Laurie's work has been driven by her deep compassion and desire to improve the adoption process for everyone involved. She's now part of PairTree, where her passion and commitment continue to shape the future of adoption, and where her remote job allows her to travel the world, living outside of her home for months at a time. Sounds like a dream. With her extensive experience and personal journey of growth, Laurie understands the complexity of adoption from every angle. Today, we'll explore how the landscape of adoption has changed over the past 26 years and how these changes have shaped her approach to her work and her personal well-being. Laurie, we are so honored to have you. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap podcast. I am going to jump right into my first question, okay?
First, I just have to say thank you so much for that warm welcome. You just made me feel so good. And I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, with 26 years in adoption, guiding and supporting both birth parents and adoptive parents, how do you think the landscape of adoption has changed since you first started, and what has been some of the most significant shifts you've witnessed? Let's start with the doozy.
Well, I will tell you the biggest shift that I was a part of, which really ages me, is the fact that closed adoption used to be like the way of adoption when I first started. So I worked my career for the first 10 years with an agency in Arizona that did adoption from the dark ages and was all closed adoption. So that is the biggest shift for me. And then 10 years in, they closed their doors. And for the last 15 years, I did all openness. And like they did a little bit of semi-open, maybe like pictures and letters, but it
Mm-hmm.
really wasn't anything like it is today, which has been an incredible shift and part of this landscape to witness. The other thing I'd say is the costs, obviously, as everyone knows, costs in adoption have
Yeah.
gone up tremendously. Um, and I'd say also like scams maybe has
Mm.
become a bigger issue. I really, when I first started, that wasn't something that I dealt with at all. And it became a bigger issue as something that you had to really be aware of. And unfortunately, it just is sad that it happens, but it's something that I witnessed as a part of and was a part of those as well. And then I think also just that, and I don't know if it's less adoptions are happening, which would obviously be a good thing, but I think that it's really that infertility is on the rise, that then
Mm.
is just making there be more adoptive parents to the amount of expectant moms that are placing a child for adoption. So that to me has been a huge thing to witness as a change too. I don't know. Does that answer all of your
Yeah, for
questions?
sure. A lot of interesting things. So I know, I think I had a statistic at some point saying there's 10 families for every one expectant mom or birth mom who ends up making a placement. I don't know if that's still the statistic or not, but that's certainly a shift because I know numbers are way down from even when I started 11 years ago. Agencies were doing anywhere from 50 to 80 adoptions a year, and now it's maybe 20 to 30. A couple of the big ones are maybe doing 40 or 50 a year, but that's the exception and not the norm. um why do you think scams are on the rise? Why do you think that's been
Well, and
such a
again, I don't know
shift?
that I'd say like it's on the rise. I would just say from 26 years ago, it didn't happen. Like I wasn't a part of them a long,
Yeah.
long time ago. And I think that it's also our, I mean, I don't know if this is why, but it's like the way of society today too. People are just trying to survive. I mean,
Mm.
and so I see it also as just a survival mechanism, that it's something that's out there too to help people. I don't know.
I think
It's sad also. I mean, for the most part, the people that I come in contact with really are pursuing adoption, for the best interest of their child. But
And we
scams
hope
happen.
that's the case. I think
Yeah, of course.
also women are just a lot more savvy than they used to be.
Well, the
Um, a
scammers
l-
are, of
the
course. Yeah,
scammers,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of birth moms come to agencies having been referred by another birth mom. And whether they've asked a lot of questions or somebody says, hey, you can get a lot of money during your pregnancy. And it's just so sad that the most vulnerable people who are just dying to become parents
Yeah, are
are
put in
the
that position.
ones.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
awful. So this shift from closed to open has definitely been a significant change over the years, as you mentioned.
yep.
What do you think has been the most positive outcome of this shift? And do you think there's anything from the closed era that you think worked well?
Yes. So I think that for the openness in adoption, I would hope to believe that it is healthier adoptees is what has come out of that.
Mhm.
Less identity issues, knowing where you came from, having that door always like cracked open for you to open
Mhm.
or close as you wish throughout your lifetime. Like to me, that's the huge part of why openness is so important. It's really for a child to decide when they're ready, but to have that as an opportunity is such an important piece of this puzzle of life in general. So I see that as an absolute positive. I mean, all the historical data and research from a social work perspective is that it is in the best interest of a child to have that openness.
Mhm.
So I see it as a positive in that regard. But to answer your question on the closed errors or stuff that I saw that I thought worked well. For myself as a professional, there was, and also, I mean, they didn't know at the time it was even happening. I mean, less heartache from all perspectives is really what I saw as like the benefit of it in the adoption process. So families never, like the way that the agency worked, where I worked for 10 years, families did not get notified until consents were signed. So there was nobody like wanting, not sure of what was happening. There was less, I don't ever want to say that there's pressure, because there should never be, but like the coercive acts that can happen today in adoption, which is sad to me, to even know they happen or that they're around, is that didn't exist, because an expectant mom had full, I mean, they still do options counseling, but there was just less heartache and less pressure on all sides from anybody, I think. I don't know. That's just was my experience in that regard, because people didn't know what was happening. Like a mom got to make her decision fully without having a family around. I don't know if that,
That's
but
so
at the same time,
interesting.
but at the same time, they didn't get to build a close bonded relationship and know where their baby was going. So I think all around open adoption is the best practice.
That's so interesting. Do you think it was just in the agency that you were working with that, number one, they weren't matched until after they signed, and number two, that everybody was giving options counseling? Because I used to hear a lot, especially in the baby scoop era, which we talked about in a recent episode I did with Damon.
Oh, I just listened to that last night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'll link to that. But do you think that was the case everywhere, or just in your little
I
bubble?
only know what I was exposed to. And it wasn't that they weren't matched. They had picked out a family. The family just wasn't notified. Like all families in this agency knew this is how the agency operated. And so a mom would pick her first, second, and third choice family. And that's who was contacted once she made her decision final.
Wow, that certainly protects
really
the hopeful
bizarre.
family. Yeah, that's so interesting. And in some ways, I wish that happened today. In other ways, like you said, that relationship is so important to everybody. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I've heard some, I have worked with some adoptees over the years. I think more men than women, which I think is a thing. I would love a research on this, but who grew up in a closed adoption and were quote unquote fine with that, like thinks that's best, right? Or and then they'll go through the adoption process, and we'll try to explain, well, now things are open, and they have a really hard time coming around because they had a closed and it was fine, and why would you open it? And they don't need to meet their biological family. And then suddenly they start learning more and more about open, but it takes them a little bit of more time to come around. Eventually they do, and they understand why. And I'd be curious now. I think I might go back to some of my families now that they've adopted and ask if that's changed their thoughts on their own adoption and wanting to know more now.
Yeah, I'll tell you on that topic too. Like, I mean, I've have friends that have been adopted and long time ago that are like in my age group. So of course they were more on the closed side too. And they've, searched and found their birth family. But regardless, I was going to say, to your point, I have had a research from a long time ago where at 21 is when a girl or a woman or a female would want to search, and not until their 30s is when a male thinks about searching. So I don't know if that's true. It's something I heard a long time ago. And interesting, the two people that I know, one's a female, one's a man, and she looked earlier than he did, or even had a desire to, because it was like what was going on in her life at the time. So I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to that, but
yeah. That's so interesting. So yeah, I mean, obviously you read it at some point in your life. So 750 birth parents you've worked with. How do you know that number?
I don't know that number is like an absolute. It is like knowing approximately over the course of the years how many adoptions I was a part of every year. Just kind of like multiplied it out and figured it out. But
well, it's an impressive number nonetheless. And I'm wondering, because everybody who works in this industry have stories that like just stick with them in their head, right? Do you have one of those stories that have shaped your experience or left a lasting impact on you? And Yeah, I'd love to know about that.
Yeah. So I will say it's a loaded question because
Hmm.
I have so many stories. I mean, I always said I was going to write a book one day, but
You
truthfully,
still
I've
can.
battled. I know, but I battle with it because these are not my stories to share. I feel like also, like I
That's
really
true.
have a hard time with that. But regardless, I wanted to share with you a story that would add value to your entire audience. And so to
Fantastic.
me, yeah, to me, the message here in this story is was a big lesson for me. It was trusting the process and knowing that all is for the good or meant to be in adoption. Because so this was this particular story where an expectant mom, and this was during the open days, an expectant mom had been with an agency, picked a family, had built a very close bond. They had met, did a pre-birth visit. Everyone had spent a lot of time together. And she delivered. Everything was going great. She discharged the hospital after 24 hours. Family was there staying with the baby. And on the second night, the baby's feet turned blue and baby gets air evac'd to the children's hospital because this wasn't a level 2 NICU hospital. And the adoptive family or hopeful adoptive family did not get on the helicopter with the baby. And that baby then was flown to the children's hospital. They got cold feet and kind of got nervous and got scared and didn't go. And when the next morning, I facilitate this entire situation and we met back with the mom. We learned from the medical team what was going on. The baby ended up needing like open heart surgery. Mom still wanted to go through with her adoption plan. And it was too much for her to be a part of this and wanted me to then be there with this baby. So this baby wasn't alone. So I got to, this is why I just love I call it, it's not even a job to me. This has like been a part of my life, but, I was the one who stayed by that baby's side in the NICU until he was taken into surgery and then stayed in the waiting room and put in not knowing what was going to happen. And she was able, I mean, the baby survived and did great. And, he's now probably, I think, like a teenager. But the point of the story is at the time, I was like, I don't even want to know if it's angry or like disappointed or like didn't understand. I had so many emotions for myself. And again, like here I am to be the support person for everybody. And at the time, I was just like blown away by what's transpiring before my eyes. And this family, of course, had to do what was best for them. And thank God they walked away because clearly they were not prepared and ready to be a parent through adoption from my point of view. And this mom got to choose a new family, which obviously is not anything that anyone wants to have to go through. Already going through this process is so difficult to make. But she went through profiles again. She picked an amazing family that was meant to be this baby's parents. And they showed up from another state as well. They got the Ronald McDonald House. They spent 6 weeks next to this baby's side. They gave up their entire life to be by their baby's side. We all went out to dinner. Everyone got to spend time together. Her mom came. Like, I basically have the most incredible heart dish that they gave me. It's like a little jewelry box heart dish that sits on the mantle of my fireplace in my home that I see every day. And I will never forget this case or this story. But what it taught me was that you trust this process and like a higher power takes care of what's meant to be. Because unfortunately, this expectant mom, birth mom, had to go through already the trauma of everything that was happening. But thankfully, that family knew to walk away. And they needed obviously more education. I have no idea what happened with them. I mean, I had to go see them because they wanted to give, I don't even remember if they were giving a gift or giving back a gift or something that I was like, at the time, I remember being like, oh my God, I didn't want to go see these people. I was like, why do I have to go do this right now? And I'm glad I did, because that moment also was really healing for, I think, all of us,
Mm,
like processing of what was happening, because you never know how you're going to respond or react in any of these situations. But at the same time, this baby, this situation could happen to anyone, biological situation or adoption. So I think it's just a matter of like asking yourself a lot of these hard, tough questions before you're in that spot or that situation. And so it's truly helped me in speaking with, educating, and getting a better feeling of what an adoptive family is going through as well. Because I've
mm.
always spent my career on the side of an expectant mom. So I never really understood um,
Mhm.
where adoptive parents were coming from. And that experience opened up so many different thoughts and feelings for me as well.
Wow, there was a lot in that story, and I'm so glad you shared that one. Thank you. A couple things that you said. First was it is we as professionals get so wrapped up in we get into mama mode, right? Whether you're a mama or not, you want to protect who you're working with and for and the baby, and like there's three people like totally involved, and it's really hard for us sometimes as professionals not to have our own judgments and thoughts about one of those three parties, right?
100%.
As much as we need to need to reserve judgment, um and you came full circle with that, and I think you're right. Like, you don't know, sometimes you don't know how you're going to respond when put into a situation you've never been put in before. I was just talking to a family that had one of these types of situations, and they fled right away, kind of like this family a little bit. There was a lot of judgment, and when I processed with them at the end, they said, "We learned something about ourselves in this whole thing. I didn't know I would just flee like that." Like, that was my response. I just ran away. And I needed that for me. And that was the way to protect myself. And then I needed space. And the point is, we don't know how we're going to respond. We aren't all cut out for everything, right? And these parents, who knows? On the one hand, should they have been by that baby's side, whether or not they moved forward in this situation? And there's no judgment that they shouldn't move forward if they can't handle. Should they have been by that baby's side? Should they not have, because they knew they couldn't handle it, but it would have been too much for them to start bonding with that baby? And then would they let the birth mom down even more? Who knows? You
Yeah.
don't know. And everybody's experience is justified in their own head. And yet here's this professional that is judging it in some way. And then how do you navigate that too, as a professional, but also as the person who's being judged in a certain kind of a way? It's complicated.
100%. Like, I was so grateful that I got to be by that baby's side, because
Yeah.
he needed somebody by his side. And I was grateful that this mom trusted me and selected me to be that person for her, like honored beyond. And I also want to clarify here too, there was like nothing that caused that to happen. Like, this mom,
Right.
not a substance user in any way. This was just like a weird thing that happened with this baby. And yeah. Yeah,
And
so
that can
much in there. You're
happen.
right. The judgment part is huge. Like, I find myself to be as non-judging of a person as possible, seeing all the colorful stuff that I've been a part of in my career. At the same time, in any given moment, we are like shocked. I mean, it's like you've never experienced something until you've experienced it.
Right. Right. I try to always, as soon as I start to go into a judgment mode, because it's so easy in this industry, right? But also, we have learned so much because we've been in it for so long. So, number one, I try to remind myself, okay, Becca, what were you like on day one, knowing nothing, right? And try to put try to put their hat on your head for a second and be in their mindset. What would you do? And it's sometimes it's hard to figure out what you would do. And sometimes also you don't want to admit what you would have done, right? Because now we know more. So it's so easy to judge. And the other thing I tell all of my families is when you get to this process of matching, and especially when you're going to the hospital, you need to just be able to go with the flow, because most often than not, things are not going to go as smoothly as we all hope they are. You might come across, talk about judgment. You might come across a hospital worker who is so against adoption, who is so against same sex adoption, marriage, whatever, adopting as a single mom. Talk about judgments. It's not just from us, but you are walking into, you don't know what you're
Yeah, I
walking
love that you
into.
said go with the flow. The best advice, somebody that was a superior of me at one time in my career said, she gave advice to hopeful adoptive families and said about that hospital experience, walking into that, you need to be like a leaf on a tree and blow like the wind. And I felt like that was such a great nugget of information, much
Mm-hmm.
harder to do than to say,
All of
but
this is.
you have, yeah, you have no control. It's like the most vulnerable position you will ever be in your life.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about, you don't know what you don't know, right? For anybody in this process, like I'm 11 years in, I think I've seen it all, and then I haven't. Um, and we both understand that very well. So I'm going to ask you a hard question that may be difficult to admit, but looking back, is there anything that you were a part of, knowing that you didn't know what you didn't know at the time, that makes you cringe today or might be difficult to admit? Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that to me today, not that it ever wasn't, but it's huge now. Ethics is like the most important part of the adoption process to me today with regards to adoption reform. And so there are a few things that, yes, again, because I was a part of closed adoptions before I knew any better or any different. I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit that my first, which I still have one of them, just because to me it's like an artifact and kind of crazy. My first business card had a stork on it. Um, and to me, that just kind of makes me cringe today because it really, a baby doesn't show up by obviously a stork. There's an expectant mom, birth mom. That is a huge piece of this. And in those days, she was like behind a curtain. And that's so sad to me today that I was a part of any of that because I know how I treated the moms that I worked with, and I had the utmost respect for. And it's just, I don't like that I was a part of those days. But again, I didn't know any different. And on that same topic, I think that expectant moms at the time were looking through the profiles that I presented them during those days was literally like a non-identified written just words of their homes of a home study, like in a narrative, no pictures. There was zero pictures shared. So it really was like I didn't know any different until I left that agency and went and was exposed to the way adoption is done everywhere else. And so to know that those moms missed out on that like makes me feel yucky. But again, it was the way it was then. So I don't know. I think those two things stand out the most to me. I still know that this work I was doing was good work to make sure they were supported well. But again, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what I didn't know. And so
Yeah.
I don't feel good about that.
And I think, nowadays there's so much more information, right? So, do people still have the excuse of, I didn't know what I didn't know? Like, is that still an excuse that people can use? Or no, because there's so much information out there, they should have gotten it somewhere else. And I hate using the word should, but I'm curious what your thought is on that,
I
because
mean, I think from an expectant mom perspective, is that what you're
just
asking?
in adoption in
Oh,
general,
yeah, I think, I mean, in
I think
adoption in
mostly
general.
more for the hopeful parent, I guess.
Oh, well, in that regard, there's just too much information out there and you don't know what to trust and what not to. Like,
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
to me, I think it's very hard for, if you're talking about a hopeful adoptive family, to know what they're looking for is right or not. Like, how do you decipher between what's kosher and not if you
Well,
don't
and
know?
that 100%. And I could have that conversation. In fact, I know we've had some of these conversations even as it pertains to the word ethics, right? Which is a big topic that's been thrown around a lot in adoption lately. And I could jump on that bandwagon all day long. And who is anyone to decide what is truly ethical and what not when there's so much gray? I mean, obviously, there are certain things that are black and white.
Yeah,
There
but
are
there's a lot of
probably
gray. I agree.
way more that is gray. And who makes the decision where that ethics line is, right?
Absolutely.
I guess what we're trying to tell everyone is this is fucking complicated.
It's complicated. That's a good way to describe it. It's a very
Oh my God.
complex journey to be on. You've got to, I think I go with, you got to go with your gut and your
Yeah.
intuition and what feels right to you. And only you know that.
Yeah. And I guess to that point, thinking about, will I feel good about this, telling my child this when they are
Right.
whatever age?
Well, and will your child feel good about the story that you've
They
created
just,
for them then as well? Because it's
mhm.
their story.
Yeah. So you've worked with a lot of birth parents, which I have not. I only work with the hopeful parents. When working with a birth family or an expectant mom,
Yeah, which
how
by
do
the
you,
way, that word is a new word also. Like I was
yeah,
always, I mean, always have like we're within the last like 2 years, and I love it because it just
yes,
gives more respect to this woman and her
yeah,
role in this process. But I always have said birth mom too, so I hear you. To
yeah,
change
yeah.
positively.
Well, I mean, and you work with both, but
Yes,
when you start working with them, she's an
yes,
expectant mom
absolutely.
who's come to you clearly struggling. I guess maybe not everybody is struggling, but I'd imagine most expectant moms are struggling. How do you approach a conversation with an expectant mom who's thinking about adoption? And on top of that, is there anything you wish adoptive parents or hopeful parents understood better about these initial interactions?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked this question, Rebecca, because to me it is so um this is a human being we're talking about. This is not like a unicorn. And I am blown away. I mean, I understand that it's nerve-wracking because you want to adopt a baby and it's scary. To me, it's no different than like from a hopeful adoptive parent side, which is how like I would give guidance before meeting all together because I facilitated a lot of these like lunches or dinners or whatever. It's really like a blind date. You're meeting someone new that's going to maybe be a really important person in your life for the rest of
Mm,
your life. Um, they're human beings. Like I approached all of my first initial meetings as going to meet a friend, like going to meet a
mm,
friend in need who, I come from a place of non judgment, acceptance, compassion, um, sensitivity. Like this is a really difficult topic and time of their life. It's crisis moment, perhaps. And so, really, as a friend, with being genuine and kind and speaking about where they're meeting them really where they're at. Um, and so, to me, from like how can a adopted family talk to an expectant mom is really just like the same way you talk to your friends, and respect and compassion and sensitivity and all of that, all of what we just talked about. But for me, when meeting all of them, when I was honored and got to be the person on the other side of the table with them for the first time, perhaps when making this very difficult decision, or at least just even considering it, I pride myself on options counseling. I never met with somebody and assumed that this was for sure a path they were going to take. I was strictly there to educate them on the option of adoption, as well as making sure they were very aware of their two other options, depending on where they were at in their process or their journey. So I did a lot of assessments for people in other adoption professionals, whether or not the expectant mom continued to move forward or not. So sometimes it was just a one-time meeting, and sometimes I met with them and then I worked with them their entire pregnancy. And that was the majority of what I did. And so a lot of them became like my friend. I mean, obviously with boundaries in place as the professional social worker here to help guide them, but or adoption specialist. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question, or did you want me
Yeah,
to go further?
no, it does. And now I want to get in
And I
a
think
little
also,
bit.
just to hold on, I'm going to do one more
Yeah.
thing about that.
Okay.
It's like none of us know how we would respond again to an unplanned pregnancy. And so
Mhm.
that's a big thing too, is like knowing
Yeah.
in that crisis moment, it's scary, it's emotional. There's so many feelings that are wrapped inside this process. And so with the other factors that might play a part of her life as well, those got addressed too. So it wasn't always adoption focused either, because there's a lot of different things that we're discussing here. So I
Mhm.
don't know. That's just an extra point.
Yeah, no, it does. It gives me a good insight. Now I want to get into the like minute details a little bit. So I'm an expectant mom. I come to you and I say, okay, I want to place my baby. What what does that conversation sound like? Like walk me through that. Do you just say, okay,
Oh,
tell me
well,
your
remember they're
story
coming.
or
What did you say?
yeah, go ahead. What were you going to
No,
say?
I was going to say they're coming to me through, I mean, I was the support person for either agencies or attorneys. So they are coming to me through one of those channels.
Mhm.
And so when I'm meeting them, I mean, I had my own little like thing that I did. Which was my assessment, is like, what are the reasons why you're considering adoption?
Okay,
Um,
so that's where you would start
I
and
would
just
always
say,
start
okay.
with yeah, well, first I always say, I mean, my meetings always start with, I've walked next to over 700 women in your shoes, but I've never walked in your shoes. I don't pretend to know what you're going through.
Mm,
I'm here as a support for you. I want to give you the education and the guidance and the resources that you desire or need to make this big, humongous decision that's going to affect the rest of your life. And you are going to be the one that walks in your shoes for the rest of your life, feeling good about the choice you make, or as good as you can about the choice you're making. And so no one else can make that decision for you. Not me, not your mom, not your family, not your friends. Like, it has to be your decision, and no one should be telling you. And that's a really big struggle that we work through, during this whole process too, is who is their support system? Is anybody else, on their side with this plan for them? And like the pros and cons. I mean, every client of mine made a pros and con list,
mm,
because there's always going to be the positive and the negative of any decision you make. And we did it for parenting and we did it for placing. Like, we looked at
mm.
things from so many different point of views and perspectives, um, because you never want to, you want to make the choice that feels the best that it can. And it's a lot of, your heart and your head tug of war. I mean, again, and I don't ever want to speak on behalf of an expected mom, because that's not the shoes that I wear ever, that I have. But I've again, been a part of a lot of people's process and been able to witness that as an outsider. And so that's my
Yeah.
answer.
And yeah. And so I like to break it down because for the adoptive parent on this end, we hear these terms, right? Options counseling. And it's like, what does that really look like? So you ask them pros and cons and why what their story is, whatever they want to share with you and why they're making decisions. And then for you, and I know everybody's different, but in a perfect world, I guess, did you then say, have you thought about abortion? Have you thought about, you know, parenting? Well, you said you talked about parenting. Is there anyone else in your family that could take this child and raise the child or help you? So do you talk
Yes,
specifically about
all of
those
them,
things?
all of them,
Mm-hmm.
all of them. And again, they mostly answer this ahead of time. Like there's also, if I'm working with an
A
attorney, there's the Quad
questionnaire.
A packet of
Yeah.
the summary,
Mm-hmm.
but we do sit down and talk and spend a lot of time talking before they do that. And then once they fill that out, then I review what their answers were to a lot of these things, whether an agency has a form that they fill out or a packet or an attorney does. The Quad A group has an actual like big thick packet. Um, and so a lot of those questions are in there, and then we dive deeper into many of them if they want to talk about them. Again, it's
Yeah.
always up to them and where they want to open up or not. I'm not there to make anything more difficult for somebody, but at the same time, I want to make sure that they've thought this through to the best of their ability, because no one wants to place a child for adoption. They make this
Yeah.
decision because it's the best interest of their child, and they feel like this is going to be a good path for their child.
Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. 750 approximately birth moms.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
it is. It is.
And
They're all different. Not one is the same story.
yeah, but not only that, it's a lot. And until you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, it's just a story that you're hearing, right? So people are just hearing a number. But to me, I know how invested I get with each one of our families. It's a lot of energy. And I know on some days you can get a beautiful, uplifting story, and then an hour later, get a heart-wrenching, pull my heart out story. And this goes on for years and years and years, some days easier than others. And many people in the social work world in general, not just adoption, experience burnout. And I know that you too experienced a burnout at some point. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that looked like for you and how you knew you were burning out?
Yeah, sure. That's a tough question. That's a personal tough question, but I'm happy to
Mm-hmm.
share. Um, so 18 to 20 years in, I would tell you, if you've ever seen the movie Girls Just Want to Have Fun with Sarah Jessica Parker, and how I'm like a 1980s girl, so she screamed, "I love to dance." I don't know if you remember that scene.
I didn't see it.
Oh
I
my God,
gotta
you have
go
to put
see
it on
it.
your list.
Okay.
I
Okay.
made all my nieces watch it. But anyways, I used to stand at the rooftop of a mountain and scream. I loved my job. Like I said, it didn't feel like a job. I've had clients tell me it was like I was doing my job. It was like I was there as their friend. And I loved what I did for that long, which is really kind of, I think, unheard of in this space. And 20 years in, I definitely started to feel a difference. I had my own personal crisis. My dad passed away, which kind of
Mm.
rocked my world. And having my own crisis kind of just changed my way of who I was. And I think the vicarious trauma that I had experienced, like you shared, walking next to all of these situations and these stories, I never realized the impact it had on me.
Mm.
And a story I will share was I had a client who was a very, let's just say it was a colorful case. I had worked with her on her previous adoption. The second adoption, I didn't even remember because the first one was like kind of almost, I don't know, you call it a stork drop, but I call it like a drop-in situation. And when I showed up the second time, she recognized me and said like, "Oh my God, you were like the bodyguard that showed up with my last adoption." I was like, "Huh?" Anyways, then we ended up bonding. Long story short, this second time was very long, and she placed. And after she placed, you would think I'd be like relieved. It was, I don't want to say it was over, but it was really a hard case. It was one of these emotional roller coasters, ups and downs, lots of drama. And I hugged her goodbye for that moment after we were leaving the attorney, and I lost it after she left, like lost it. And I lost it meaning like cried, bawling, hysterical. And that evening, I like to write. I have a personal travel blog. I like to write. It's how I get my feelings out. And I wrote to the 4 attorneys who I personally knew very well, I'd worked with for a long time, like this, my secret thoughts. Just, I had to like dump it out. And the dump, I didn't know who I was going to send this to. I just wrote it for myself, but I shared it with them. And I remember being so scared hitting send because I was like, oh my God, am I going to be judged? This is like so vulnerable part of my heart that I'm sharing. And they all wrote me back. It was 3 attorneys, actually. They all wrote me back and said along the lines of, at least 2 of them, like, thank you for sharing. We all should share more with each other. I feel many of the things you said, you do great work, but we all have these thoughts and feelings and should be sharing more. And what was really interesting is the other attorney wrote back to me and told me that she thinks that I was experiencing PTSD and that maybe I needed to seek one of these like counseling sessions or it was like basically a workshop that she had attended that she was giving me. And I remember reading it being like, oh my God, I was like kind of offended. And then I recognized, okay, she's kind of right. Like maybe I have to like look in the mirror too here. And I did. And, I did some EMDR work and learned that I had a lot of stuff that I had witnessed and been right alongside next to and had like, I don't know, there's a book out there called Feelings Buried Alive. And it was just a lot of beautiful things and sad things and loss and so many things that I really knew it was time for like a change in my life. But adoption has been like an addiction for me. There's no other career that you can find that is going to be so rewarding and yet so exciting and so life-changing and making a difference and just so many things. And so anyways, I left adoption for a year and I did sales and it was soul sucking and horrible and I hated it. And then I found where I am today, which I know is one of your later questions. So anyways, adoption has stolen my heart and where I'm meant to be, but I had some own personal work that I had to do. So I did it and I'm back.
Thank you for sharing that. What's EMDR?
Oh, I'm not going to say it right, but it's like eye movement derapidization. It's a technique of like therapy.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes.
It's how to like deal with
used...
trauma. It's really good for trauma. I mean, I've since told many people about it. If you ever
it's
have,
used a
lot of
lot in
people
the
have trauma.
world
It's
of
good.
adoption.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you tell your boss when you
I didn't
when
have
you
a
went?
boss. I owned my own business. I mean,
Oh, you were owning. Okay, at that point you
yeah,
owned it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone knew, like, everyone was sad that I was like giving this up for a short time. Like, yeah, I mean, I was like, I need a break. I think I was working with like 14 moms at one time. Like, it was just
Yeah.
too much. It was a lot.
Well, and you're right, and these attorneys were right in that we all need to get a little bit more vulnerable sometimes. I think a lot of people and share with each other. A lot of people who work in this industry um, come with their own stories first of all, and then experiencing a lot of these feelings. And it's so important to support each other.
Well,
What
here
did you
I'm
want to
gonna,
say?
not to like toot my own horn and like plug something here, but what I have now been able to do, which I'm so proud of, there's a book that's called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And
Mm,
it was written by a therapist
I
who,
read it
oh, you did? Okay, so it's an amazing book. So when
by
I,
Laurie.
Lori
What's
got,
her?
I want to say
Yeah,
Gottlieb.
Gottlieb.
Yeah.
Laurie
So when I
Gottlieb.
came
It's
to
great.
PairTree, I was like, I want to start a support group for adoption professionals. And we have an amazing adoption support group for adoption professionals that are home study providers. We've had a Quad A attorney join now as well, but it meets once a month, and it's for 1 hour, and everyone comes together to support each other. And it is like taken on a life of its own. Like, I am so
I need
grateful
to know about this.
to
I
have
don't
this.
know about it.
Yes, it's like social workers and home study providers.
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's needed. And I remember I spoke at a conference once, an adoption conference, and I got up there and the first thing I did, because I think we all get so hardened by this work, and we all forget, like I said earlier, what it's like to be in their shoes, like whoever's shoes that you're working with. And so I had everybody shut their eyes, and this was a room full of professionals. And I was so nervous to do this, but I said, I want everybody to shut their eyes and remember how you got into this work and why you got into this work. We all came into this with such a passion and a love, and right, it didn't feel like work. And somewhere along the line that shifted for a lot of people. And that has to do with so many things, right? The laws and all the things that we come up against in this business. And if we could just all be human with one another, right? And share our perspectives and where we're coming from and where we, and the things that we have been through, it would make it so much easier. Okay,
Very true.
PairTree. You're at PairTree now. You called it your dream job. What does your dream job look like, and why is this so ideal? And is this when you came back into adoption? Like, tell me that whole story. Like, how did you
Yep.
get back in, and why
Yep.
is this such an ideal job for you? What is
Yep.
PairTree?
Well, I was looking for a change, and I came across my cousin, who's an entrepreneur in like New York, Connecticut area. He had said to me, "There's got to be something in technology and adoption." I was like, "It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist." And I started researching like crazy all the time. Like I told you, I entered this sales job and I hated it and I was miserable and I needed to feel needed because that was where I was my entire career. And and I came across an article in TechCrunch magazine about Erin Quick, the founder of PairTree, and the
Mhm.
changes she was making in adoption and why and what her mission was and all of that. And I kind of stalked her. I went on LinkedIn and connected with her. We had a half-hour meeting, and she was like, I liked her. And that was like maybe a year went by. I think I did a little bit of consulting for her on the side. Like, that was that. And then, like, after a year, I was going to Seattle with my mom for her birthday trip. And I just reached out to her and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Washington. Can I meet you for lunch?" And I met her for lunch and was like, "I'm going to work for you someday. I just know it. I don't know." And then like, she's like, "I'm going to come back and find you when I'm ready for you." And a year later is like when it all came together. And I was hired at PairTree, and I've been there for 2 years. And basically, your question, why is it my dream job? Because I get to do what I love, which is adoption. I have the freedom that I've never had in my life before, that I never knew I was missing. I was like
Amen.
married to my job, which I loved, but it kept me in Arizona. Like I had to be boots on the ground. That was my job. And so, like you said at the beginning, I get to work remotely now, which I'm taking advantage of, escaping the Arizona heat and leaving in the summertime and working. But most importantly, the reason why it's my dream job is because I am a part of making positive change in an industry that I feel so badly needs it. And the fact that I get to just meet more and more professionals in person across the country while I'm traveling has been a dream to me, because it's opening my eyes and teaching me many more things. And I just get to like expand my knowledge of adoption, which is, again, like some reason pumping in my blood constantly.
Well, it's a whole different piece of adoption too. You're not working directly with
Yes,
part of the
exactly.
triad. You're working with the professionals, right? Trying to bring
Yeah,
them
I mean,
in.
I get to talk now with families a little bit as well,
Okay.
but yes, professionals, and adding my like expertise and knowledge to, which
Yeah.
without even knowing, like, wow, Lori, you really do know a lot about this topic. And so, yeah, that's why.
Don't
And
sell
yes,
yourself short, girl. That's
not doing
awesome.
the hard work anymore. But
Yeah.
again,
The
and
soul
it's
sucking
crazy
work.
because I do miss it at times. Um, and but yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why.
And I just said soul sucking work, but that's not true. It
No,
can be soul filling, and yeah,
100%.
I
Oh,
take
for
that back.
sure. I mean, I do like,
Yeah,
and it's, yeah, yeah. I mean,
for
I
sure.
got lucky to, yeah, be a part of a case here and there when I'm home when needed. So that's always nice.
Perfect. What do you think is the biggest challenge today for birth families as well as hopeful families considering adoption? And is there a way we can better support them?
So that goes back to something we said before. I'm going to say the answer to that is finding ethical, licensed, good professionals, and knowing, I think, unfortunately, like the people that have the most money is who people find first when you're searching
Mm,
for a professional online, and they're not always the best people to find.
interesting. Okay. So are you saying that that's a big challenge to finding the right places to work for, or is the
Yeah.
biggest challenge for
For
hope? Yeah.
both, moms
Yeah.
and families. Like, how do you know who you're finding? And you're finding because people are searching,
It's,
and you're searching.
yeah.
It's kind of like the book, I'm sure you've read, Relinquished. She talks a lot about like
Yeah.
advertising and all of that stuff. I think that's the biggest challenge today for moms and
S-
families. And
So
how do
what
we
can
make
we
that
do?
better?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, personally, I think you're already doing it by having this podcast and
Thank you.
educating people about what's available to them. And I love that you have a voice in this space. And I think I'm doing it by being a part of PairTree. So, it's just getting the word out. And
And
I don't know.
PairTree also has a great podcast too called Modern Adoption, correct? Is that what the name
That is
is?
correct. It's called Modern Adoption with Jess and Aaron, or Modern Adoption with Aaron and Jess. I think it's with Jess
Yeah.
and Aaron. But yes,
I'll link that in the show notes too.
yes,
It's
yes.
also a great one.
Yes, I'm
Um,
telling you, these two podcasts are in my ears every time it drops. Like I don't
Me
miss.
too. Me too. You had a quote on your LinkedIn account, which I'll link in the show notes. You can all check out Laurie in LinkedIn. But her quote says, "Just when the caterpillar thought the world was ending, he turned into a butterfly." And that quote speaks a lot to transformation. So, how has this philosophy, this quote, guided you personally and professionally, especially navigating the complexities of adoption?
I
Tell
love,
me.
first of all, that you like really dive deep into all of your questions and like researched me. I was like, wow, what a
Oh, yeah, we
question.
stalk. Yes, we stalk.
I would say that it really goes back to all about trust. Like I'm a really spiritual person,
Mm,
and I believe there's a bigger picture to this entire process. And so to me, it's a matter of letting go of control of things that we can't control, And there's always a silver lining if you look for it. Trusting in the process, and the process, life is the process, adoption is a process. So that's kind of why I say that. And it
I
just
love
means a
it.
lot to me.
And this is why I love you so much, because I'm the same way. Laurie, this was filled with golden nuggets. So I
I loved
loved that you were part of this podcast. And Laurie, thank you for being the president of the Adoption Roadmap Podcast fan club.
I'm like, what am I the president of?
I get the best messages from you, and I really appreciate you listening to words. But before I let you go, I have a quick fire round that I just want to throw at you, throw you off your game a little bit. First one is a shout out. So name a person or an organization that has impacted your adoption experience or views on adoption.
So this is all of these quick fire, I know, because I listen to your podcast. These are the hardest questions to answer, because how do you just come up with one? So some of these I'm going to have more than one, but I just have one here. It's the Lifetime Healing Foundation, because to me, birth parents deserve post-placement care for the rest of their lives. And the fact that this foundation provides that and offers it to birth parents, expectant moms, all of the above, is a huge impact. And their voice has been something that has opened my eyes and changed my perspective on many things, because I'm only involved in adoption at the beginning, and to hear the stories of the aftermath as well is so important for people to know.
Love it. What's one book that has had a big impact on your life?
Okay, this is the one that I have such a hard time. I'm a huge reader. I love memoirs. I'm going to say The Invisible Thread, which is a true story about hope, or Being Mortal, which is like about loss and life.
I might throw you off with this next one because I don't think I've asked it before. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Okay, well, I'm not the biggest fan. I would say my dad, but if that's not allowed to be the answer.
Yeah, no, that could be your dad.
Okay, well, my next one was RBG.
Okay, that's a great one.
But my dad is number one.
Awesome. Why RBG?
Because she's such a pillar in women's rights. And she's this strong, powerful, tiny little Jewish woman.
Oh, love it. What's a hobby or activity that you've recently picked up that you absolutely love?
Well, my pseudo name is Dora the Explorer, because I love to explore new things all the time.
Awesome. Describe adoption in 3 words.
Oh, this is so hard. Trust, serendipity, overwhelming, and beautiful. So I had 4. Sorry.
Remember, success is a continuous journey. If you find yourself veering off course, just steer back onto the roadmap until you reach your destination. And whatever you do, never lose hope. Hope is that light inside you that will lead you to your dreams. Laurie Shelton, thank you so much for being here today. You have a huge light inside you, and I love that you have followed your light in your heart throughout your career. And thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you, Becca.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.